Hi there, I'm Ahsan Shaw, and you're watching me on YouTube and Facebook Live. Today we are going to talk about scam of natural law and human law. What is the natural law? Natural law is a theory of ethics and philosophy, and it states that human beings have the intrinsic and inherent values that makes them to determine right from wrong, and it is not the society that decides, or it is not the society or the legal system that decides right or wrong from uh, for them. It is their inherent value. They Human beings know the right and wrong inherently, and it may seem a very catchy sentences, and but when you dig down a bit deeper, when you uh, when you try to read the meaning behind the words, then things become more clear. It works usually in the general form, but exceptional cases it doesn't work, or in most cases it doesn't work. For instance, subjugation of women. It is also supported and condoned by the natural law, and the hundreds of years of slavery was also condoned by the natural law. And there are many other issues there are still in today's world are condoned by the natural law. And that's what we are going to discuss today, the scam of natural law. And my guest is Edward Konowicz, and he has joined us from Virginia, United States. Hey Ed, how are you?
Well, I'm okay. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. The weather here is very hot, so morning is the best time for me to go live. Scam of natural law. What a topic.
Yeah, well, we ought to discuss law in
Mm-hmm,
general, which
mm-hmm,
is law is supposed to represent justice or uh, not necessarily equal, but a
mm-hmm,
reasonable bearing of responsibility and
mm-hmm,
penalties for those who, are not responsible. And,
mm-hmm,
and we have like four or five different types of law. Now, a
mm-hmm.
lot
The
of people
civil
call natural law
war.
natural justice, and it's not quite true because
Yeah.
they associate it with nature. And
Mm-hmm,
in nature, a praying mantis may eat the male after mating, and
mm-hmm,
it's basically brutality that wins. So when we say natural law, too many people think, oh, let's go back to nature. And no,
mm-hmm.
that's not justice. Nature
Yes.
is just
It's not it's not just possible to go back to nature.
no, it isn't. We're well, every species has its own habitat.
Mm-hmm,
And the word habitat in English is very good because it's a collection of habits, which
mm-hmm,
is an owl sees the world differently than a mouse. A
mm-hmm,
mouse sees the world differently than a bat. A
mm-hmm,
bat sees the world differently than a cardinal, different than
mm-hmm,
a tiger. Every
mm-hmm,
species sees the world differently.
mm-hmm,
So nature's a interaction of all these different worldviews, almost
mm-hmm,
a competition
mm-hmm,
of which view is going to dominate. And human beings have a lot of things in common with nature, our DNA, our organs. I mean,
mm-hmm,
a lot of animals have intestines, hearts, lungs, brains, and so we have a lot in common, but we're a different species. So
mm-hmm,
I would call natural law or supernatural law the law of the species, the law of human
mm-hmm.
beings. And every
And,
culture,
mhm. When you say natural law, I have a problem with many environmentalists. Okay, I agree on the environmental issues that they are real, but the problem with the environmentalist or the those who support environmental issues, that they put blame on everything. They blame everything on the modern technology, and they don't comprehend, or they don't appreciate the goodness of the technology.
yeah, well, there, right now,
Mhm. Mhm. We are talking is because of
technology,
the technology.
particularly war,
Mhm.
technology and pharmaceutical
mhm,
technology are the biggest threats to human beings. So it's
mhm,
understandable they're a little bit anti technology because
mhm,
no one wants to be bombed by a drone. No one
mhm,
wants a dangerous vaccine forced upon them.
mhm,
So technology has been associated with a lot of wrongdoing and a lot of corruption, is like the building collapse
mhm,
in Surfside by Miami in Florida in
mhm,
the United States.
mhm.
There was apparently a lot of negligence,
Mhm.
negligence to make a profit. So
Yes, Zach.
so
Zach is
people
here.
tend to, oh,
Mhm,
hi, Zuck. Uh,
mhm,
so people tend to be anti human society because so many problems are created by humans out of their
yes.
selfishness
Mhm.
and lack
But
of perspective.
but those problems, there is also goodness coming out of those problems. If there weren't any human progress, then we would have never realized the harmful impact that human beings are causing on the environment. It's because of the growth. We made mistakes. Human beings have made mistakes, and they have brought us here.
Yeah, I actually taught technology, so I'm not
Mhm,
anti technology. I would
mhm,
counterbalance
mhm,
the anti technology with
mhm,
volcanoes destroy a lot
mhm,
of nature. So
mhm,
do locusts.
mhm.
So do um, brutal invasive
Animals,
species.
yeah.
You put an invasive species in Australia or New
Mhm,
Zealand or Hawaii, it could
mhm,
destroy the habitat.
yeah.
So each species lives in a different habitat, and
Mhm,
their habitat has priorities or values. And I think we could call that somewhat natural law.
mhm,
And then there's supernatural law, which is
mhm,
we conceive of justice and compassion and higher levels of reasoning and intelligence, where we
mhm,
can reduce suffering of
mhm,
animals, live with more compatible nature. I mean, it's
mhm,
like, some plants are good. I like the oak trees around my house. They supply
mhm,
acorns for the squirrels, give me
mhm,
shade, but they cost me about $1,000 every other year to
mhm,
trim the branches or to remove the dead ones.
mhm,
They're expensive, so it's not free. The
mhm. Yeah.
squirrels and the shade and the protection from the heavy wind in winter comes
Mhm.
with a price that I
Yes,
have to
with the
pay
fun.
people to take
Yeah.
care of the trees. So we form contracts with nature,
Mhm,
and if I get poison ivy in my backyard, I pull
mhm.
it because I don't want
Yeah.
to get an allergic reaction where I'm scratching my skin until it bleeds.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we make these choices.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there's this natural law, which is sort of the law of the species. It's not the law of nature. There
Yeah.
is
Nature.
no law of nature. That's
Mhm.
the scam.
Yeah.
The second scam is that the state or the government is trying to pursue justice with law because most of law is used for the benefit of those people in power. They're not law, human law is not used for the people. So
Mhm.
there's a conflict between species law,
And the
supernatural law, and
mhm.
man-made law. And there's about three or four
Mhm.
different man-made
Types of
laws.
mhm. Civil law, criminal law, and business law. Many kinds of laws.
Yeah, there's common law,
Mhm.
there's culture and customs,
Hey, Moon.
religious customs
Mhm,
that
mhm,
become law.
mhm.
Yeah, hi Moon.
Yeah.
Hi Zuck.
Mhm,
So there's a lot of different types of law, and
mhm.
most people
Yes.
get them incorrectly,
Mhm.
which is the natural law is not the law of nature.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
it's
a theory. It's a theory. It's not actually the law.
No, it's improperly named. So you
Yeah.
have you could say human species law, which is
Mhm,
how is the human species behaving? What is
mhm,
its experience of
mhm,
of justice, what
mhm.
seems appropriate, and a lot of times it's wrong. I mean,
Yeah,
there's that
yeah,
big debate about eating cows and pigs. People in the
mhm.
Middle East are not supposed to
Yeah,
eat
yeah,
pigs.
pigs, yeah.
People in Europe and in North and South America eat pigs, and they feel that that's okay.
Mhm,
So human law varies per culture,
mhm.
and so does
And
state and
different.
criminal law.
Just
So
like,
we're
for instance, in Saudi Arabia, if you don't believe in God, then they chop off your head or put you in the mental institution that you don't believe in God.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you believe in God too much in the West, you're put in a mental institution,
Yeah.
and your
So
brain
this
is
is
damaged with drugs. Hi,
in
Adam.
Saudi Arabia is a different natural law, and then the Western countries you have a different type of natural law. So it's just a natural law. I think is just an incorrectly named. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Mhm,
basically what people are presented is not true.
mhm,
And we have to dig a little deeper and
mhm,
sense what is true. Like, your what does your family expect, which is sort of local family law, but that's not the courts. When you hear
mhm,
family law in the courts, it's the state feels it owns everybody and can do what
mhm,
it wants. But family law in your family, there's different
mhm,
customs and
mhm.
expectations from family members.
Yeah.
So you have to. I hate to use the word discern. I've overused that word, but you have to discern differences,
Uh,
and you have to be able to argue your case, whether
mhm,
you're talking to just a human being about friendship or
mhm,
some contract. You have to be able to present your position and have the other person rebut it or give
mhm,
counter positions and negotiate.
mhm,
So a lot of law is really negotiations.
mhm,
The government law doesn't want to act like it's negotiable.
mhm,
And if you're materialistic,
mhm,
um, it doesn't look like there's any room to negotiate. But I do think there's a spiritual law too.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
think depending on your ancestors or your angelic guardians or the amount of field that you have gathered in your life, I
Mhm.
think it has some power.
Yeah. I
I,
like
I
the
don't
spiritual
I don't
law.
think people are equal.
Yeah. Everyone is different. And in terms of intellectuality, in terms of energy, in terms of connecting with nature and with the higher power, everyone is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And different cultures are. It's like Adam, he
Yeah.
was kidnapped and human
Mm,
trafficked,
mhm.
trafficked as a human by the courts. The
Yeah.
doctors actually are trafficking in human beings and charging outrageous prices by imposing particularly mental illness treatment that people don't want. This is
Yeah.
the case with Britney Spears.
Yep.
She's supposed to take this lithium, which damages the kidneys,
Yeah.
and this is forced upon her.
Yeah.
So
And
you can't call that law.
yeah.
That's tyranny,
And
but it's
yeah.
called law. So law
Mm,
is frequently a disguise for tyranny. It's like when
mm,
Britain or the United States invades a country.
yes.
They claim they're doing it for
Mm,
law, like the
mm, mm,
Romans, where we're
mm,
going to establish law, but really they're robbing the resources of that country.
mm,
So law is usually a scam until you can argue your case. I actually think you can argue your case. Yeah, Highland.
Because you don't have a choice to argue your case because they are not going to listen to you. The people who are in power.
Well, you can. You may have
Mm,
to win your case like Nelson Mandela while you're
yeah.
in a prison. You
Mhm.
may have to argue your case after the judge rules.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. He
like Bill
spent 20 years.
Cosby. Bill
Yeah.
Cosby argued his case. He made these deals with these women,
Mhm,
and those deals were abrogated or broken, and he
mhm,
won his case in jail.
mhm.
I mean, he was convicted by those in power, according
And
to the,
now
and
he
then
just
he
came
argued
out.
his case.
Yeah. He just came out from the prison,
Yeah,
and
so
it shocked me. It shocked many people.
yeah, you can win your case.
Mm.
And the judges may not like it, the juries
Yeah.
may not like it, but that's why there's always been an appeal court.
Mhm,
Even Rome, you could appeal to Caesar
mhm,
because Caesar was supposed to be intelligent enough to recognize if you argued your case and had power.
mhm.
Well, I
Yeah.
almost agree with Adam says we can't reject the lies if we've never seen the truth. It's
Yeah.
hard to reject the lies until we see a good example, but we
Yeah.
can feel something is wrong. A lot of times, but I'm unusual. I
Mhm.
reject what I'm taught. So, no, that's not true. I don't know what is true, but that's not true what I was just taught.
Yeah, when we say the word truth, truth has many versions of, and it varies from situation to situation, from culture to culture. In one culture, there's one thing is acceptable, in the other culture, is not acceptable. So at one time, it is truth, and the other time is not true. So what is truth is still a mystery.
Yeah, and this is what's difficult. I mean, you may
Yeah.
need a
Hmm.
lawyer to work through the courts if you're
Yeah.
formally charged because you just don't know how to do the appeals, you don't know how to do the paperwork. But that lawyer may not be on your side now. He has a
Hmm.
certain, he or she, pressure
Hmm.
to file the correct motions, which are procedures that you can't. Or some people study this in jail and figure out how to file the procedures and motions themselves.
Hmm.
But
And they
others,
defend themselves.
there was no procedures or motions to the
Yeah.
Bastille during the French Revolution. The
Hmm.
Bastille was a prison notorious for torturing political dissidents in France and even killing them. And
Hmm.
by the time the French Revolution happened, there was only 8 people in the Bastille, 8 prisoners, and the
What
crowd
about
came and released them.
what about the usage of contraceptive and the other abortion? They are also against it because of it. It is against the natural law.
Well, they claim natural law. It's
Yeah.
against their concept of morality. I mean,
Yeah.
every person has a concept of what's right and wrong.
Mm.
They may call that natural law, but it's their concept. And
Yeah.
if enough people or enough of influential people, I don't necessarily mean politically or financially influential,
Mm-hmm.
people argue the case, the
Mm.
law may have to change according to how the most influential people argue their case.
Yeah. I think
And
the natural law is also the main reason behind racism and the other tyranny of yeah, this segregation, class segregation, gender segregation, and many other types of segregations.
yeah, well, the caste system was based
Yeah,
on a claim
yeah, yeah.
that some
That you are
people
born.
had better karma than others and were to
Mhm,
be born into a wealthier, more harmonious family, and others did not.
mhm,
And there are boundary conditions. Anyone who's really helped the poor or the needy knows there's a limit to how much you can help them. You help
mhm.
someone too much,
Yeah, it
you
becomes a
go into
burden.
damage.
Yeah,
And
there's a
that's a
limit.
strange thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's boundary conditions, which is we could call that natural law, which is you sense what your
Hmm.
obligations are, you try to fulfill your obligations, and then you sense your limitations. So natural law, I would really like to redefine as sensing your limitations and
Hmm.
knowing when you can act and when the response is too hostile and you can't
Hmm.
react. And I think that changes with each person. What is natural law for one person is
Is
not
not the
natural law
nature
for
of
another.
for the other person. But it doesn't work like that for the system and for those people who believe in it. They think that that human beings inherently know what is right and what is wrong for them, and they have defined those certain boundaries. And if you go just like usage of contraceptive, abortion, slavery was 100 years. Slavery was condoned by the supporter of natural law. Subjugation of women, as also still in my part of the world, caste system. caste and creed system is still very active in India, Pakistan, and in the region where I live in, and it is also supported by the natural law.
Yeah, Zuck a Buck
Hmm.
raised his
Hmm.
question claiming the whole universe is only stuff eating other stuff, consuming other stuff. Well, that's not totally true. Some things are poisonous,
Yeah.
which is, I agree, we assimilate. I think all consciousness assimilates other consciousness in terms of consciousness and also into our bodies in terms of food. But some things are poisonous or toxic to us and undermine us. So we're looking at compatibility, and compatibility is based on your worldview or how you feel about the world. So I don't think it can be just pushed back to this materialism that, oh, everything is just based on predators. Who can eat who? No, I don't think so, because I think even tigers and lions know there are boundary conditions. But killer whales know that. Killer
Yeah.
whales will not kill and eat a human being. They will kill a human being sometimes, but they
Yeah.
won't eat them.
Yeah.
So they
They
know
will
there's
kill
a
them.
boundary condition there.
Yeah. When you cross their boundary, when you enter into their boundary, then you are predator, or they feel threatened by you.
And Adam was raising a question of universal law.
Allah.
I like
Yeah.
the term universal law, which is,
Yeah.
I think everything is, I'll explain what I think
Yeah.
universal law is. Everything is consciousness at a
Mhm.
different level of development. And the universe, for some reason, forms nurseries or protection areas. Like an alligator is
Mhm.
obviously lower consciousness,
Mhm.
but is still protected in the nursery of a swamp in tropical climates. If it gets out of the swamp and goes into a suburbs or a neighborhood, it's probably
Then,
going to be brought back or killed,
yeah.
which is the universe allows territory, boundary conditions for different levels of consciousness to develop. And even though you're a higher consciousness, you just can't always kill lower consciousness because you're going into a boundary condition where you could be harmed. And
Mhm.
you can't violate that boundary condition. And it isn't there as a fence. Human beings build a
Mhm.
fence or a wall, say, here's the boundary.
Mhm.
But there is a natural boundary conditions. You got two capabilities. You got the ability to encourage or bless, or the ability to discourage or curse.
Mhm.
And you're going with encouraging or discouraging, you're developing your own habitat or things that are more compatible with you. And the higher level of intelligence, I think, the more secure is the habitat. But other things, can try to invade the habitat. Could be a tiger, could be an army. So we're at a very, I think, primitive stage of development on Earth, where we really haven't had the rise of a highly intelligent community that's compassionate. I think it's possible. I think it may
Yeah.
happen in the next 100 years. For the
Mhm.
first time, a nation is born that not only believes in human freedom but can protect it. We haven't had that on Earth yet.
We haven't had that on
Yeah.
us yet. I agree on this point. And when I say the universal law, it is also too general, and just like the natural law, I think we have to be a bit more precise and calling everything with law. It become it's a, you can say, universal theory, universal natural theory. To some extent, it is acceptable, but law is something that completely different.
Yeah. Well, there are laws, even Jefferson and Washington, who were good legal scholars,
Mhm.
or they were so called deists because they felt there was law to the nature of the universe, particularly after Isaac Newton.
Mhm.
They felt that the universe was mathematical, and
Mhm.
mathematics represented laws like force
Mhm.
equals mass times acceleration.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the universe has habits which we can describe mathematically. which is those habits form habitats, and those habits which continue, we can call law, that they create boundary conditions. It's like an alligator is going to tend to bite or eat a human being. So the law is don't go swim with alligators. But killer whales don't tend to bite or kill human beings. So you can go kayak with them. They might dump you out of the kayak and play with you, but generally they have different habits. So universal law is sensing the different habits of different consciousness. And like we can't live in the habitat of the moon because the moon has a different habit than the earth.
We
So
also
I
can
see
live.
universal law as what is the habits or habitats that you're facing and which are compatible with you and which habitats do you keep away from. So I think there is universal law.
Okay.
It's based on
Not.
intelligence.
Mhm. Okay, we can to some extent we could say that, but I don't think we should attach the word law with the natural law or with the universal law. It's just a theory of boundary that you have to the nature and the universe has created different boundaries. You have to stay in the boundary. When you cross it, then uh, you are invading the boundary of the other person and the other species. And when they feel threatened, and they would attack you.
Yeah, and it could be just, a
Mm,
boundary condition could be
mm,
radioactivity at
mhm.
a nuclear
Yeah.
power plant. It could be high voltage
Mhm,
and wires up a pole, which you don't
mm.
belong up that pole unless you got special equipment. It,
Yes.
it, it could be poison in the ground. You don't belong
Yes.
in certain sections of
Mm,
Yellowstone National Park because you could fall into a boiling pool of
mhm,
water with sulfuric acid. There are boundary conditions, and human beings can post signs. We can actually
mhm,
post language. Stop. Don't go any further. You need
mhm.
safety glasses. You need a
Yes.
helmet on.
Yes.
So we
Yeah. The boundary
recognize
conditions.
boundary conditions.
Yes.
But there's boundary conditions in the habits of culture, which then
Mm,
become law. And certain people or families control most cultures, and
mhm,
then they develop the law to protect their control.
mm. So, what are your final thoughts on scam of the natural law or natural law versus human law?
Well, I think natural law should be seen as a scam. There's no
Yeah.
law in nature.
Yeah. It's also the law
um,
of the species.
it's different species have different
A
habits and
different laws.
laws.
Yeah.
You
And
can't
different
compare
cultures.
us to a
Mm-hmm.
praying mantis. You
Mm-hmm.
can't compare a grizzly bear to a shark.
To
They have
yeah.
different habits
Yeah.
and they have different rules. And you go in their territory, they become
Yeah.
the judge and prosecutor. You go swim with sharks,
Yeah.
or
It's not gonna happen.
you
Yeah.
go into a tiger cage. You're
Yeah.
subject to the law of the tiger, and I see it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
I see it as boundary conditions. Most people
Yeah.
don't. They see it as
Mm-hmm.
materialism, as
Mm-hmm.
if these boundary conditions are not well defined. I think the boundary conditions are much more defined than a random reaction. People who are materialistic say, oh, these boundary conditions are a result of random activity. No, they're not
Mm-hmm.
a result of random activity. They're a result of a long momentum of habits, and we can figure
And
that out.
yes. And I think we have discussed enough. And thank you, Zakebak. Thank you, Adam. And thank you, Moon. Thank you, Linda, and other people for joining us for your wonderful comments. And you had made us to keep moving. And natural law is there's no such thing as natural law. It's just a boundary. Is that different law species have different boundaries and they have different territories. They have different laws. And when we talk human beings don't have the natural law. It's just uh, and the different cultures have different laws. And those different cultures have different natural laws, and they vary from one to another. Just like believing in God is one thing, but in the European world, if you too much believe in it, they put you in the jail. If you don't believe in Saudi Arabia, then they will put you also in the mental hospital. So that's how it varies. And
Yeah,
if
but
you have any
there's
questions,
also people have their own personal law or
mm,
standards, and they have some power.
yeah,
A person by
and
themselves has some power as long as they don't cross too many boundary conditions.
yes. And thank you, Ed, for joining us
Okay.
for your intelligence and wonderful views. And thank you guys for joining us for your comments. And I'll see you next week. And we'll come up with some other topic. And thank you. Have a good day, good night, good afternoon, wherever